Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is game one from the 2012 Fide World Chess Championship match between the current champion Viswanathan Anand and the challenger Boris Gelfand. This is a best of 12 game match with time controls for each of these 12 set such that each player begins with 120 minutes and an additional 60 minutes is added to each player's clock after move 40, and another 15 minutes is added to each player's clock after move 60, with each move thereafter carrying a 30-second increment. If things are level after those 12, we would then enter a 4-game rapid match. Regarding the prize fund, it's set where the winner is going to receive a little over 1.5 million US dollars, and the loser still taking home a little over 1 million US dollars. So in this game one, Anand with the white pieces kicks off with d4, and Boris replies with knight f6. After c4, we now have g6, and there's definitely a lot of home preparation that goes into these games. Again, for the World Championship here, a great opening battle goes on. Both players really trying to catch one another off guard. How off guard Anand was after, let's say, this move to g6, I do not know, but I do know that this g6 move was not played by Gelfand in over a decade. So that gives you a little bit of insight regarding, players trying to catch one another off guard here. I believe the last time was in 2001 when this move was played last by Gelfand out of this particular opening here. So moving forward, we do have knight c3, d5 now. An aggressive start to this match. d5 enters the Grunfeld, and I think many thought it would, let's say, start out in a much calmer way, but the Grunfeld is anything but calm. It's a hyper-modern opening. What you'll see oftentimes is that white will build a center, and black will look to just rip it right apart in short order, and that's what we see going on. Typical moves: knight f3, bishop g7, and now something happening in the center. Takes, e4. Here we go. White is building a center. Black helping white build that center, reinforce d4, but doing that so as to not lose any time with a knight retreat. c5, this is what you have to do in short order. Okay, white has a center. You have to break it down in some way. c5 does that. If you're going to play bishop g7, you have to run with c5. You have to break the d4 point. Moves like knight c6, bishop at some point coming up to g4 contributes as well to applying pressure on this d4 point, the removal of a knight, which is defending d4. Moving forward, bishop b5 with check, knight c6 may seem like the not so typical reply, but it's the correct move. Throwing the knight into a pin, it's a temporary pin. Eventually there's just going to be a castle, but again, this knight belongs on c6 where it applies pressure to the d4 pawn. You may think bishop d7 is a bit more natural way to meet a check. That way you're not working yourself into a pin, but there are some drawbacks associated with that. Just pointing out one quick thing, we could have rook b1, and already maybe there's some issue with a bishop takes bishop followed by a rook takes on b7, something along those lines. And I'm not so sure the queen would be well placed, to just kind of have to babysit this bishop. In the event the bishop is taken, the queen is just going to kind of be tethered to that bishop. I think she really does want to play out to this a5 square. This turns out to be a really nice post in the Grunfeld. So just a quick point right there. Instead of bishop d7, we do have knight c6, and now d5, very forcing line piling up on that pinned knight, and now queen to a5. Here we go. Not only pressure on the bishop, but possibilities for maybe taking on this square with check. In response, we have rook to b1. Half open file gets out of it any possibility for queen takes with check, grabbing the rook. And now we have a6, finally throwing a question to that white bishop. If you're wondering if at this point, instead of queen a5, why not grab this pawn and then grab the rook? The reason is because if you do that, you lose. There's now two threats that black is needing to meet: queen takes rook, as well as pawn takes knight. After the smoke clears, the best that black can hope for is a position where white has 2 minor pieces for the rook, which is overwhelming. White is actually winning in this variation. This knight will fall, and it's just game over. So we're not entering that. Instead, we have after after this d5 move, we have queen a5, and now rook b1, getting on a half open file, defending that bishop, and now a6, bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop. There is a significant difference between those last 2 white moves that we saw. These last 2 moves being rook to b1 and bishop takes knight. If you take the knight right away, what's the big difference? The big difference is that this pawn is still on its home square, and black would love that, because the a6 square is still available for this bishop to cause white a serious headache. You might think, well, white can still castle, and the bishop can't play here and stop castling, but so what? It could still play here with tempo. This is the main idea. And if it's playing here, then there's later possibilities for, let's say, bishop takes pawn or something. You really just don't want to, in other words, in short, allow this bishop the a6 square, the a6 to f1 diagonal. An additional reason why this bishop would be maybe well placed on a6 is because it's developed and it still gets to watch over that b7 square. Why might this be important? Let's have a look. At this point, after rook b1, a6, which was played in the game, bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop. You'll note when this bishop does develop, it's likely going to be playing to g4, and as soon as it's played, there are lines where this bishop can immediately, the rook can immediately make use of that b7 square and apply pressure along the black 7th rank. So a little important, a small detail, but a very important detail regarding that move order right there, and why it's important to first make black play the a6 move before capturing on c6. You don't want to give that bishop the a6 square. So a6, chop, chop, and then castles, and now queen takes a. There really isn't, there's other possibilities for when this pawn could be taken with check. Let's say, after takes right here, castle. If we have bishop takes pawn right now, I believe we could just have pawn takes right here. This is a passed pawn, and I think this is a more serious threat than this pawn right here. So we're not going to be entering that particular line. If in this position we had, instead of a6, bishop takes pawn, we could have bishop blocks, just running with one quick line, bishop takes, queen takes, knight takes. Eventually it gets to a point where this a6 move will be needed. The bishop backs up. After b5, now we take the knight. Black is up a pawn, but this pawn is passed. The pawn that black is up is doubled, and soon enough this pawn will be taken. So something to pretty much avoid on the black side right here. These different instances where black can be taking on c6, as appealing as it is to take a pawn with check, really is not leading to any advantage for black. So from here we have that a6 takes, and now castle, and queen takes a2. So black is now up a pawn, and first we have rook to b1, kicking that queen back, just meeting the threat of queen takes rook, queen a5, and now d6, and things become a little bit critical here, because we have the potential for a structural change right here. We're not seeing pawn takes. We're having that pawn pressed forward in the event of takes. Now things become very difficult for black, right? There's not going to be castling. The queen is very deep in that black position, and there's trouble around the corner. So in response, we have a very awkward move to have to make, but the rook is bumping up now to a7 to provide some lateral defense to this e-pawn, so that black can finally complete or take steps to complete development, or in other words, get castled. So rook a7, bishop g5, more pressure being applied to e7, and we have e takes d, queen takes d. These dark squares, need to be watched over. Both are doing just that right now. The queen and the rook are helping out. After queen d7, again, the main idea here is black just wants to get castled. The rook putting pressure on the queen. Queen takes c. Hitting that bishop, the queen comes back to c7 to defend and welcome a queen exchange, and there really isn't much better than to just go in for a queen exchange at this point, and we enter a much more simplified endgame position after just this move 18 right now. Queen takes, rook takes, and now bishop to f4, hitting that rook. Rook b7, and another awkward move. Earlier we saw rook a7 having to defend that e7 point, and now we have by Anand really starting to maybe go on the defensive here with rook to c2. So certainly the tides have turned a little bit right here. We had white pressing forward, and now having to make just this one defensive move right here. The evaluation shifts ever so slightly in favor of black in this game one. So finally we do get to see castles by black. King safety, not an issue for either side at this point. This pawn is passed, but can it be put to good use? We have bishop d6, rook e8, and now knight to d2 to meet the threat on that e4 pawn. f5, trying to open up the position. The more pawns that are exchanged is usually going to benefit the side that has that bishop pair. They tend to be more prominent in positions where there are fewer pawns. So looking to open up the position with this f5. White still needing to find a reliable home for this knight. f3, looking to have a knight just sit there on that e4 square. After pawn takes, knight takes, bishop f5, both players decide to shake hands and end this game one peacefully. There isn't really a way to show an advantage in this position. Just running with, let's say, one line right here. After bishop plays to this square, we could have bishop takes pawn, rook to c8, bishop to this square, again keeping in mind that there is this pin, and so a move like bishop d4 is just hanging. Bishop d4 just hangs that bishop, so bishop back, bishop takes knight, pawn takes, takes, bishop takes here, and the main idea is rook d1, get this rook in a spot where it's active, getting behind this passed pawn. It's really not going to go anywhere. The material is balanced in such a position. This pawn, even though it's valuable, being that it is a rook pawn and we are in a simplified endgame, it's not really anywhere close to being a serious threat. It's still a long way off from promotion, and neither side's king is out of play. Both will be getting it active soon enough, and it's a peaceful result. It's a just result there after this move right here. Bishop to f5. This knight does have a good post, and this first game of 12 ends in a draw. So that's all for this video. We'll see what happens in game 2, and as always, I hope you got something out of this video. Take care.